Welcome to the Scientist Sage SANGA. I'm so happy to have you here with us tonight, and we're going to talk about SUKHA. And SUKHA is happy for no reason. And this is an interesting word. It's a Pali word. And there's a little more in Buddhism, there's these two ideas of happiness. And one is this, what they call pamoja is one of the words they use for it. And that's happiness that's hitched to something, that's tied to something. And so if this happens, then I'm happy. So it's conditions in life and events and things like that. But then there's this other happiness that is described more as unconditional happiness, but literally the definition is literally ease, peace, bliss, that kind of happiness. And that's sukha, and that's happiness for no reason. So not necessarily that the outside things are working out the way that we might want them, but there's an internal happiness that comes from specific presence, just absolutely being present. Tara Brach describes it as this freedom of our heart when we're having this unconditional acceptance of what's going on in our lives. And it's this awake, open awareness. So it's not that I say, okay, in this moment, I'm happy. In the next moment, not so much. In this moment, I'm happy. So it really is, I'm in this moment, and just being in this moment is happiness. And so it's this presence. It's a force of presence as opposed to a force of circumstance. And that it's called in Buddhist thought, the blessing of an awakening heart. And so I really take that bit of information to heart and think, this is when I open my heart and I'm just present to someone. It's different than when I evaluate things with my mind and then make an opinion about whether I'm happy or not. And so that idea, we can have this acceptance and peace and just this nice base of happiness. Anthony DeMello, I think his name is. Let me just go back to my notes for a moment. He talks about absolute cooperation with the inevitable. So I love that. I have a friend that has a little discomfort with different kinds of weather. And so the weather determines her level of happiness, which is, if you live where I live, it's very, very changeable, moment to moment. By the time you get dressed to go outside, it might be different. And so, of course, that can be really uncomfortable for people. But this idea of full presence, when we are just being present and being, that happiness arises out of there. And so that kind of experience, if we can literally take in whatever is happening and just open up to it without the evaluation part, it's not easy with that because we have lots of things that come up, and lots of faith traditions sort of seem to put down desire. And it would seem that if we have desires and they don't meet what's happening outside, then we can't be happy. But that's not it at all. It's about making friends with those desires. It's fine to have them. Sometimes they'll be met, sometimes they won't. But sometimes just even having the desire is pleasant, even if it's not met. And so it's not about not having that. It's about making friends with desire, making friends with each moment. Whatever's going on. And Thich Nhat Hanh is one of my favorite writers about peace. And he talks about that spiritual life isn't just about suffering. So we don't have to be this, like, I'll put aside everything and I'll just make it through things, but that we have to touch peace and happiness. And he talks about peace in every step. That he was the author that influenced me to fall in love with washing my dishes and make that a very happy time for me. But the idea that we have this capacity for happiness, it is part of our potential. It's supposed to be there. Just like we have this innate sense of fear so that that keeps us safe. We have this innate sense in happiness and desire because that helps move us through the world in positive ways. And so that we can get into different kinds of thinking. We can approach life as a problem to solve, or what I like to say, a game of disaster dodgeball. What new horror will this day bring to me? And we can actually, gird our bodies to feel like that. Like, what's coming next? When's the other shoe going to drop when things are too happy? And Marcy Shminoff, no, I'm not pronouncing that right, but she talks about this happiness for no reason. And she talks about this idea of people not feeling comfortable being too happy. And in fact, we actually, when I see that people are struggling to be happy, and when people are having this kind of happy, if they get caught on a detour, they're enjoying the scenery on the detour. So when people are unable to conjure that enjoyment in something, in what's just going on in their regular day-to-day lives, I really use that as a marker to say we should explore some things around depression, or what orientation someone has to life that might be preventing them from engaging in that happiness. And that idea, biological set points about happiness really do exist, and they can be impacted by different things, by brain chemistry, by disease, by ongoing stress, a whole number of things. And actually, in the next session, I'm going to talk a little more about that. But for today, we're going to come back to this idea of just having sukha with a little practice, having that happiness arising in myself. If I can't connect to that happiness for no reason, I start paying attention and practicing the paths back to that. And if I'll find myself being annoyed a lot, I'll sit down and go, okay, what's that going on? And it might be that, that lighting isn't just right, or that tone of someone's voice didn't sound nice to me. And I'll sit down, let that move through. Lots of times it is background stress that's going on that prevents us from being in this present moment of happiness. And we drag it along from moment to moment. So I might have, there was an incident in the parking lot the other day where this man was yelling at this woman and she's honking at him in her car. And I didn't think it bothered me too much. But as I went along, I was feeling a little irritated. And that, what is that about? And it just rolled through my mind that it was like, oh, that little incident, it made me feel uncomfortable. And so I had to take a moment and specifically release that. So sometimes we have things like that that are blocking us. Like I say, there could be other things, illnesses, incidents. But when we pay attention and just come back to this moment, because in the moment in the parking lot, it did feel uncomfortable. But a few moments after that, while I'm driving around, there was nothing feeling uncomfortable. But yet I was still blocked from my comfort and happiness in that moment. So there was a poem in the email from this week that I'm going to recite in case you didn't see it. And it's called Tripping Over Joy. And this by Hafiz, and this is the essence of this for me. What is the difference between your experience of existence and that of a saint? The saint knows that the spiritual path is a sublime chess match game with God, and that the beloved has just made a fantastic move. That the saint now is continually tripping over joy and bursting out in laughter, saying, I surrender. Whereas, my dear, I am afraid you still think you have 1,000 serious moves. And I don't know about you guys, but when I start thinking I'm in control, and I think that I am, unwilling because I want things to go a certain way so I can be happy, I think, I keep busy with those 1,000 serious moves that I think will make something be different, instead of that surrender that brings me back into the present moment where I can feel some peace and some happiness. And I I really understand that that background of presence is what makes me happy, because people have said that I could be happy sitting in a closet. And I can actually, because that is my natural state. And it has been with me a lot. And I go back to that if I am conscious and present. If I get dragged along by some unconscious thought, then I start getting unhappy. Or even if I get dragged along by some exciting thing where it feels really happy and all of that sort of thing, it loses its, we'll say, juice, because I'm trying to grasp it and hold on to it. And so this idea of being utterly present, just utterly present here, it's transforming our relationship with life and not having well-being being dependent on certain circumstances. And so this idea, we can beat our biochemical set point by practicing presence. And people will, say that, that's not possible. And I had an interesting sort of debate with someone yesterday about the chemical components of addiction versus trauma and all sorts of things like that. But what we were both saying is there's a way out. There's a way out of those things, that we can change what's happened to our biology. So that idea, if we shift to full presence and we evolve our happiness, transforming that relationship, then there's still going to be ups and downs, but we have somewhere to go with it. And I'm going to be at peace with this moment, because very rarely in this moment can I not make peace with it. So we need to remind ourselves. And I want to just go back to the last session when we talked about some ways to do that, some paths. Things like the relax. That's the number one piece of surrender. Relax. It's really hard to be happy when we're like this. And so that relaxing our body, relaxing our faces. If we put our hand on our heart, our body starts releasing nice chemicals that make us relax. So relaxing is part of the first part of coming into this moment. When I'm trying to get to the next moment, I am not relaxed. I am like looking forward. I'm leaning forward. I'm not here. The idea also about requesting that I come into this moment. When I am in something difficult, I say things like, may this serve my awakening. May I grow through this. So I'm coming into this moment, but I'm making it into a question, a request for me to come here and not fight whatever's going on. And the idea about revisioning. If I vision myself having a good time in the moment, generally that's where I go. When I am seeing myself struggling, I struggle. So it doesn't mean we're not struggling, but I can be content in my struggle. And I'll tell you an example of that in a moment. But those ideas that we talked about, that repatterning our response. So if I get ahead of myself, if I am, running around really upset, just stepping back and being with my upset starts to shift me again. If I regulate my body, I come into this present moment, because wherever my body is, that's where I need to be. One of my teachers, Sandra Ingerman, posted a comment saying her guides had told her that we have to return to our bodies to be happy. And that has never been more true for anyone more than me. When I'm home in my body, I can be happier. Now, the getting home can cause us a little bit of distress. Like, I might not like something about my body. I might have a cold. I might be tired. But if I just come home, there's a deep peace to that. So this idea of regulating your body and just we talked about revering, honoring the moment makes us happier. Honoring this moment makes us happier. When we are fighting the moment, we're not happy. It's taking energy our life energy to fight the moment. We have lots of energy just a moment. We conserve energy when we're not fighting the moment. Like that moment right there, trying to figure out that word. It was okay to sit still for a minute. And then it was funny. And then it was and then it was there. So there is this lovely flow in the moment that we can come back to all the time. And the idea of practicing presence, that we talked a lot about repeat when we were talking about pathways to this, and repeating the practice of presence is essential to being able to move into it. So I want to wind this part up with a meditation about what is giving rise to my happiness and what is blocking my happiness. Okay. And so I'm just going to give you that example I promised. When my first son was really, really fussy for 2 years, like all the time. And he had to be held or walked or rocked, and it was a tough couple of years. And I really moved desperately to be wanting to be in a different moment. And finally, because I think it went on long enough for me to get the concept, I just moved into the moment. And I would be in there with meeting him with his fussiness, meeting me with my distress. And we had these lovely, lovely moments. And I would walk and I would sing and we would rock, and I would be like, okay, this isn't going to go on forever. But right now I'm here with this beautiful miracle baby, and I can just be with him. And even in his tears, I would adore him because it was this miracle in my arms. And that shifting, and sometimes we need to move through things. There was some really deep sorrow that he was feeling so bad, and I couldn't do much about it. But moving into that, it would open up. And then when we would get those jewels of peaceful moments, it was like ecstasy. And just noticing, just attuning to him, walking out the door, and his little face would go, and he would stop crying. And I'd go back inside, and he would start crying again, back up the door. And so there were this pull to presence to be with him, to see what was the next moment going to be like in our lives. And there was this certain piece of being in the flow, even when he was fussy. And it meeting those moments, whatever they are, or however long they go, back-to-back moments, bathing it with that intention and light, and just being present, being gentle with it, being gentle with ourselves when we're struggling being in even. It gets lovely. But when I get controlling, it got worse. And, like I'd want him to be not crying on demand. And you can bet that did not go well. So this ground of happiness, this capacity for unconditional presence is what we want to look at. And so when we relax here, take a breath, starting with that relax. And I actually want you to be present in your circumstances and see if there's anything in your circumstances that you're having a reaction to. And it doesn't mean that you don't do something about it, okay? I studied in a Buddhist temple for a while, and it was don't move. If you have an itch, don't scratch it. And I didn't do that well there. But I learned things. I learned a lot about being present. And I can have this flow of presence. If I am incredibly restless and constantly like fixing my shirt and, that sort of thing, of course, that isn't going to be useful. But when you're just present it doesn't go that way. You can have an itch in your nose come up and it's like, oh, yeah, my nose is itchy. Yeah, I wonder if that'll go away. And then you might scratch it or you might not. It's just the next moment. So you may want to, get a blanket, turn off your screen, put your feet up, whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do to make yourself comfortable, just go ahead and do that. So we'll meet each moment as it comes up. And you might notice how you're breathing. And you might notice that when you notice your breathing, you change your breathing, and that's fine. That's fine. And you might pay attention about what literally causes your happiness to rise up. It might be being warm. It might be that feeling of relaxing. It might be a moment of quiet, not thinking about anything. It might be your body relaxing. But just open up. You might have ideas come in about you're happy when you're around certain people, or when things are going certain ways for you. You might notice those sources of happiness too. Just let yourself keep browsing. Noticing how you might find other things coming in. The happiness of a beautiful sunset. Happiness of waking up. The happiness of laying down to sleep. There's many moments that contain this sweet happiness throughout our days. And then notice happiness that is due to something. I feel a certain happiness when I hold a baby. When I win a game. When I realize that I have a day where there's nothing I need to do. Those moments where they're conditionally happy. Those are there too. But they hold the secret of what might block our happiness. If I have a busy day and that makes me less happy, if I've tidied up my home and someone messes it up, so wanting things my way at particular times. Wanting other people to be a certain way so that I can be happy. wanting timing to go my way. Wanting to be successful at certain things. Marcy Shimoff is the pronunciation. And she talks about success can't make us happy, but happiness can make us successful. And just notice what it is for you. Are those conditions on your happiness? And not with resistance to them, but just with acknowledgement. And as you come out from this contemplation and move forward through the next week or so, notice as you go along, how happy am I right now? How is my well-being? And what's impacting it? And you might find you give it a dose of presence and it shifts things for you. But I encourage you not to be overly unhappy with your unhappiness, but just to bring presence to that as well. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'd love to hear about your experience at scientistsage@gmail.com. Or if there are topics that you would like to talk about, please feel free to send them to that email address as well. Good night. I am with you. You are with me. Blessed be.